This fall, I'm starting my freshman year at the local community college. But with over a week left until Labor Day, which marks the official start of the semester, I'm trying to make the most of the end of summer, hanging out with friends and having as much fun as possible. That's been my routine all season, but wasting time aimlessly every day is starting to bother me. So, my small, loyal group of friends and I decided to come up with something exciting to properly wrap up the summer. It's mid-August now, the days are getting shorter, and the evenings are cooler. Soon, the leaves on the trees will start turning yellow and falling, and everything around will shift from colorful, vibrant summer vibes to the gray and mundane tones of autumn. But it's still too early to think about that. These last warm summer days are ours to make the most of before the long, cold months set in. My friend Daniel and our close friends Katie and Marie were always up for any kind of adventure. We've had so many crazy escapades together that I've lost count. One warm evening, we gathered on the porch of my house, tossing around ideas for an epic way to end the summer. "Hey, Max," Daniel said, glancing at me. "How about we throw a party at your place? Invite everyone from the neighborhood. It'd be wild." "Yeah, right," I replied, shaking my head. "So you guys can trash my house and get someone arrested?" "No thanks, that's not the kind of summer send-off I want." "Then how about a road trip?" Marie suggested, her face lighting up. "Oh, yes. Let's do it," Katie chimed in eagerly. A road trip sounds great and all," I said, scratching my head. "But I'm broke, haven't even started college yet, let alone gotten any grants or scholarships. Let's keep it budget-friendly." "Then maybe we could go on a little day trip out of town," I said thoughtfully. "Somewhere in the woods, or to some kind of unique place." "What kind of unique place?" Daniel asked, frowning slightly. "Well," I began, "there's that abandoned school nearby. It's supposed to be all haunted and stuff, but none of us have ever been there." "You mean the one near Maplewood?" Katie asked, her eyes lighting up at the suggestion. To be honest, I've long suspected that Katie has a thing for me. Whenever we're hanging out in a group, she laughs the loudest at my jokes, always sits next to me, and looks at me with that warm smile. There's no way she doesn't feel something. She's a petite blonde with bright blue eyes. In the summer, she's almost always in short dresses that highlight her figure. I won't lie, I feel the same way about her. But so far, I haven't had the courage to make the first move. A trip to some creepy, abandoned place might just be the perfect opportunity to get closer to her. The classic setup, a spooky atmosphere, a girl who's a little scared, and then you, the brave knight ready to protect her, offering a helping hand when needed, and maybe, just maybe, earning a thank you kiss on the cheek, for now, just a friendly one. "Oh, that old school near Maplewood is a creepy place," Daniel said, his tone serious. "I've heard the stories and the legends locals tell about it. It's freaky." "Yeah, that's all cool and everything," Marie cut in, looking a bit confused, "but I have no idea what you're talking about. What's this Maplewood school? And could someone fill me in on the story? I'm totally lost here." "All right," I said, leaning forward as I started my explanation. "Maplewood is a small town about 12 miles from here. There's a bus that goes there in the morning, afternoon, and evening. The town is known for one horrifying event that happened decades ago, a tragic fire at the local school. Back then, the town didn't have a proper fire department, so people tried to put out the flames themselves. When firefighters and rescue teams finally arrived from the city, they uncovered a haunting scene. Dozens of middle and high school students had been trapped inside and couldn't make it out alive. The next day, the entire town gathered for a mass funeral at the local cemetery. They even set aside a separate section of the cemetery to bury the victims together. Ever since then, locals have been telling eerie stories about the place, each one more chilling than the last. Some say they've seen smoke rising from the abandoned school, others claim to hear the cries of children late at night. Once, a town drunk swore he saw ghosts in the windows. Of course, no one believed him. Who knows what you might see after a few too many drinks, but the story stuck. It's just another piece of the Maplewood School's collection of creepy legends. So, I thought it'd be cool for us to check it out. See for ourselves whether there's any truth to these stories, or if it's all just nonsense. I finished my story and fell silent. The others were quiet too, especially Marie, who had never heard the tale before. She stared at me, clearly spooked, struggling to find the right words to respond. "That's insane," Marie finally managed to say. "And you guys actually want to go there?" "I mean, I'm down," Daniel shrugged. "It'd be cool to see what it's like now. The school's 3 stories tall, so there's definitely plenty to explore." "I'm in too," Katie added, her tone thoughtful. "But we need to plan this out, figure out how we're getting there, what to bring, food, flashlights, that kind of stuff." "Well, if you're all in, then I guess I'm coming too," Marie said quietly. It was obvious she wasn't thrilled about the idea, but backing out just wasn't something anyone in our group would consider. The next day, I was sitting at my desk, playing PUBG on my computer, when my phone buzzed with a notification. I took off my headphones, grabbed my phone, and unlocked it. "You've been added to a new chat," the screen read. I tapped on the notification, which opened Telegram. Daniel had already created a group chat called The Trip and added me, Katie, and Marie. "Hey, everyone," Daniel wrote. "Let's plan the details for our trip here. I'm thinking we take the evening bus on Saturday and head back Sunday morning." Marie replied almost immediately. She wasn't happy. In her message, she complained that she had expected a daytime trip and hadn't signed up for nighttime wandering around a creepy, abandoned school full of spooky legends. Getting distracted by my phone caused me to lose the match in PUBG. Frustrated, I closed the game and moved to my bed, pulling out my phone to type a response in support of Daniel. The idea of a nighttime trip really appealed to me. The atmosphere would be unforgettable, and it felt like the perfect way to cap off the summer with something exciting and emotional. Soon after, Katie joined the conversation. Given the fact that she liked me, it wasn't surprising that she sided with Daniel and me, agreeing to the nighttime adventure. It's Friday, and I'm packing my bag while imagining our trip. Flashlight, spare batteries, a knife, and some rope. I also threw in a basic first aid kit, bandages, cotton, antiseptic, and a few other essentials. Daniel had been messaging in the group chat about what we absolutely needed to bring, and it turns out he's pretty experienced with this kind of thing. He knew exactly what we'd need. Once everything was packed, I lay down to sleep. It took me a long time to drift off. Tomorrow night promises to be an unforgettable adventure. I woke up early to sunlight streaming through my window, filling the room with its warm, golden glow. The last rays of summer, I thought as I glanced outside. The leaves on the trees were just beginning to turn yellow. The morning air was still crisp and free of car exhaust, making it easy to breathe. It carried a sweet, fresh scent that tickled my chest and filled me with a quiet sense of peace and contentment. After soaking in the moment, I headed to the bathroom. The rest of the day felt like an endless wait, my nerves on edge in anticipation of what was to come. And so, at 7 p.m., our group stood at the bus stop, waiting for the last ride to Maplewood. A noisy, old bus pulled up to the station. The automatic doors creaked open, and we started boarding. The only available seats were in the back, which turned out to be perfect for our group. The 4 of us slid into the last row, taking up the empty seats. For most of the ride, we sat in silence. None of us really knew what to expect from the old school, and it showed in the nervous energy hanging in the air. Katie, however, seemed unusually calm. Maybe it was because she felt safe with me nearby, or maybe because she hadn't heard much about the school and didn't fully grasp the danger or the unexpected things that might await us there. The atmosphere on the bus was unique. A faint smell of gasoline lingered in the air, the engine made odd grinding noises, and dust particles floated visibly in the beams of sunlight streaming through the windows as the sun sank closer to the horizon. 40 minutes passed quickly, and soon we spotted a monument with the name Maplewood proudly displayed on it. About 10 minutes later, the bus began to slow down, pulling off to the side of the road. The doors creaked open noisily, and the four of us, Marie, Katie, Daniel, and I, stepped out onto the dirt. Oddly enough, no one else got off the bus, but we didn't pay much attention to it. Around us stretched a typical small town, with old, weathered houses lining the road. Behind the makeshift bus stop lay a dense forest, its edges creeping close to the roadside. The old bus rumbled away, belching a cloud of black smoke from its exhaust as a plume of dust rose from the gravel road. Our group stood in place, glancing around in every direction. "So, where do we go now?" Marie asked. "Hang on, the signal here is bad." "Let me wait for the map to load, and then we'll head out," Daniel replied, staring intently at his phone screen. "It's kind of nice here, fresh air, nature," Katie said thoughtfully, settling onto a makeshift bench built from rough planks resting on two logs. It was the only real indicator that this was, in fact, a bus stop and not just the side of the road. "Got it," Daniel exclaimed and started walking toward the forest behind the stop. We exchanged glances and followed him. With each step, I felt my anxiety grow. I couldn't quite explain why, but the unknown ahead of us was unsettling. Who knew what we might find? What if all those legends turned out to be true? My thoughts were interrupted when Daniel stopped abruptly in the middle of the path. He glanced around before stepping off the trail. "We keep going through the forest," Daniel announced, pushing his way through the branches. The forest wasn't too dense, but the bushes, tall grass, and small branches made the path tricky to navigate. Daniel led the way, with me behind him, followed by Katie and Marie. I did my best to hold back the branches as I went, making it easier for the girls, especially Katie, to pass through comfortably. After about 15 minutes of walking, the forest began to thin out. The further we went, the fewer trees there were, until eventually, we stepped out into a wide clearing. In the middle of it stood a massive, eerie building, its walls blackened with soot. 3 stories tall, the building loomed ominously, its appearance enough to send a chill down anyone's spine. Some windows were still intact, while the main entrance was boarded up with planks. The empty window frames on the 3rd floor told a grim story. On that terrible day, students must have smashed them in a desperate attempt to escape, as the wooden frames would have been impossible to open in the fire. "Whoa, that's a massive building," I said, impressed. "But why is there a school in the middle of the woods?" "They say there used to be more buildings here, along with a botanical garden or something like that," Marie explained. "But the town council decided to tear it all down. When it came time to demolish the main building, they chose to leave it as a memorial. Now, all that's left of the other buildings in the garden is this dense forest." "Wow, sounds like you did your homework," I remarked. "Yeah, couldn't sleep last night, so I ended up researching the place," she admitted. "All right, let's find a way in," Daniel ordered, and we followed his lead. The main entrance, though missing its doors, was completely boarded up, so we decided to circle around the school. Most of the 1st floor windows were intact, and even the broken ones were covered with iron bars. After making our way around the building, we found another entrance, a side door, most likely a service or emergency exit, that seemed to lead to the school's inner grounds and gardens. The doors were wooden, completely blackened and charred. Daniel gave them a hard kick, but nothing happened. The only response was a loud creak that echoed through the otherwise silent forest. By now, dusk was settling in. It was close to 9 p.m., and while it might still be light out in town, the shadows of the tall trees here made it grow dark much faster. This time, Daniel tried a different approach. Instead of kicking the doors inward, he grabbed the handle and pulled. A cloud of dust and ash puffed out as the door groaned under the force. With another strong pull, the door finally creaked open, releasing a low, eerie moan. Inside, it was pitch dark. Almost no light made its way into the building, and the blackened walls only added to the oppressive atmosphere. "Turn on your flashlights," Daniel instructed, and we obediently followed his lead. It had been years, maybe decades, since the fire, but the school's interior looked almost exactly as it must have on its last working day. Benches lined the hallways under the windows, and scattered across the floor were half-burned notebooks, maps, and other remnants of school life, eerily preserved. We decided to explore the building slowly and thoroughly. However, the long and tiring journey here was starting to catch up with us, so we agreed to take a break in one of the classrooms and grab a quick snack. We chose the first classroom we came across, pushed 2 desks together, and pulled out our dinner. Daniel and I hadn't put much thought into it. We brought crackers, cookies, and tea. The girls, however, went all out, packing a ton of sandwiches with cheese and cold cuts, along with some fresh veggies. "Well, look at this," Daniel said, biting into a sandwich. "A full-on picnic in a creepy abandoned school. I never thought a place with such a dark history could make for such a nice dinner spot," he added, chuckling with his mouth full. "True that," I agreed, taking a bite of a sandwich and washing it down with a sip of warm tea. The girls beamed at us, clearly proud of their work. Conversation didn't flow easily. Instead, we mostly focused on eating. Once we were done, we cleaned up after ourselves and started discussing our plan for exploring the rest of the building. "Let's explore the first floor together," Katie suddenly suggested, taking charge. "Then we can split up for the second and third floors. The layout is symmetrical anyway, so if we find something interesting, we can show each other later. Plus, we still need to figure out where we're spending the night, so let's keep it moving." I couldn't help but glance at her with admiration, and she noticed, smiling shyly before dropping her gaze. "Did you see that?" Marie's voice rang out, startling all of us. "What's wrong with you?" Daniel shot her an annoyed look. "Do you want the whole town to hear us?" Daniel, you don't understand," she stammered, her voice trembling. There was something outside the window. A face. It was pressed against the glass, staring at us. "Marie, it's just your imagination. This place has a way of messing with people. Plus, you said yourself you were reading creepy stuff last night. Your mind's probably playing tricks on you. Come on, let's keep checking out the first floor." The classrooms were all similar: charred desks, blackened chalkboards, scattered student notebooks, and even some leftover school supplies. As we moved from room to room, we saw glimpses of what once was. In the chemistry lab, a partially intact periodic table still clung to the wall. The physics lab was unmistakable, with some strange contraption made of wires sitting on the teacher's desk. Our next discovery was the woodshop, located in a partially underground room. Surprisingly, the workbenches and equipment there looked almost new, as if untouched by time. "It's weird that no one ever looted any of this equipment," I said thoughtfully. "Even the workbenches would probably fetch a decent price at a scrapyard." "There's nothing weird about it," Marie snapped. "I wouldn't take so much as a bolt from a place like this. And no graffiti either," I added. "Have the local kids never snuck in here? Or are they just super respectful and preserving the place?" "You ask the strangest questions, Max," Daniel said, glancing back at me. "You planning to leave your mark here or something?" "Come on, give me a break," I replied, waving him off with mock indignation. I was just thinking out loud. Yeah. Let's head upstairs. We've covered the first floor already." We made our way up to the second floor. It wasn't much different from the first, except there were more broken windows, though the bars were still intact behind them. Oddly enough, the walls and classrooms on this floor seemed to be in better condition than those below. "This place feels more like a prison than a school," Katie said with a puzzled tone. "I get having bars on the first floor, but why would they need them up here?" "I don't get it either," I replied. "So, are we splitting up?" "Yeah, we're splitting up," I confirmed. "Katie, you take the left wing, and Marie, you take the right. Daniel and I will head up to the third floor. Same approach, check the rooms, and if you find anything interesting, let's regroup and share." As I made the decision, I had no idea what awaited us. But that's a story for later. The girls headed off in their respective directions while Daniel and I climbed to the third floor. Reaching the top step, we split up as planned, each of us starting to explore the rooms on opposite sides of the hallway. The rooms in my section were mostly standard classrooms. The only one that stood out was the geography room, its walls covered in charred, half-burned maps. The sight was unnerving, and I didn't stay long. At the end of my hallway, there were 3 doors. 2 of them led to the bathrooms, one for boys and one for girls. The third door, however, opened into the biology lab. Now this could be interesting, I thought as I stepped inside. I glanced around before heading toward a smaller adjoining room, the storage closet where the teachers kept all the materials for their lessons. The door was locked, but it had a small glass window, yellowed, cloudy, and scratched with age. I pulled the handle harder, and with a loud creak, the door finally gave way. The cramped, dusty room greeted me with an unpleasant mix of smells, something rotten and sickly sweet. It was strange, considering how much time had passed since anyone had been here. Then again, with the single window sealed shut and the door closed for who knows how long, it wasn't entirely surprising that the odors had lingered. In a glass cabinet stood jars containing various specimens, rodents, snakes, and other creatures preserved in formaldehyde. In the corner of the storage room stood a worn skeleton. It looked disturbingly real. I stared at the skull, its hollow eye sockets seemingly fixed on me. Just then, I heard a knock on the window. My eyes darted to the glass, and a chill ran down my spine. Faces were pressed against the window, their hands scratching and tapping at the glass. That alone would have been terrifying, but the realization that I was on the 3rd floor made my blood run cold. A lump formed in my throat, making it hard to breathe. I tried to scream, but all that came out was a faint rasp. Without turning around, I backed away toward the door of the storage room, only to feel the unyielding surface of the locked door behind me. I spun around, and in the small window on the door, I saw another face pressed against the glass, its mouth moving as if trying to speak. My ears began to ring, but I could still make out the whisper. It grew louder and louder, until the words became clear, "You must stay here in our place." A horrifying realization hit me, these were the ghosts of the students who had perished here, unable to find peace within the cursed walls of this school. My chest tightened, each breath becoming more labored. The air grew unbearably hot, and a wave of weakness washed over me, leaving my body trembling. Meanwhile, Daniel was making his way toward the biology lab, the last room left to check in his section. Stepping inside, he approached the teacher's desk, where, surprisingly, a stack of student files had somehow survived the fire. Curious, he began flipping through the folders. Each one had a photo of a student attached. As he skimmed through them, Daniel suddenly froze. One of the files had his own photo on it. He began reading and quickly realized it was his student record. But in this file, he was listed as an 11th grade student of Maplewood High School. The next files he flipped through belonged to his friends. The more Daniel read, the more his anxiety grew. His chest tightened, his breathing became labored, and his body felt weak and unsteady. Suddenly, the file in his hands burst into blue flames. He threw it into the corner of the classroom, staring in shock as the other files ignited one by one. Panic took over, and Daniel ran to the door, but it was locked. Faces began appearing in the glass of the door, those same ghostly faces from before, whispering in unison about the need for replacements. Katie and Marie had decided to trick the boys. As soon as Daniel and I headed up to the 3rd floor, the girls joined forces and began exploring together. But their eerie exploration was cut short by the screams echoing from upstairs. They raced to the 3rd floor, where smoke hung thick in the air, and tongues of flame licked out from beneath the classroom doors. Over here, the biology lab. The screams came from there. Katie shouted, sprinting toward the room. Marie followed close behind. The lab door was slightly ajar, flames flickering out into the hallway. The girls rushed into the lab and found me barely conscious, choking and wheezing. My hair was singed, and my face was smeared with black soot. They grabbed hold of me and began pulling me out of the room. "Where's Daniel?" Marie yelled, glancing frantically around before running back into the hallway. Katie stayed behind, trying to bring me back to my senses. It didn't take Marie long to find Daniel. His agonized scream could have been heard in the center of Maplewood. She found the classroom door he was in, wedged shut by a beam that had fallen from the ceiling. Daniel stumbled out of the classroom and collapsed at Marie's feet, completely drained. Meanwhile, the whispering that had been haunting only the boys now reached the girls as well. The terrifying voices, mixed with the crackling of flames and the groans of the boys, created a soundscape straight out of hell. The group gathered in the middle of the hallway. In every window, shadowy figures of students flickered. They whispered incomprehensibly, clawed at the glass, and some even screamed. "What do we do?" I shouted, my voice desperate as I pointed toward the stairs engulfed in flames. Every possible exit was blocked. "Jump," Daniel croaked, starting to move toward a window. The entire hallway was filled with smoke, forcing us to feel our way through blindly. The ghostly silhouettes now moved not just beyond the windows but within the swirling smoke itself. "Wait, I've got something," Katie yelled, pulling a small icon from beneath her jacket. Katie raised the icon above her head and began reciting a prayer. The flames roared higher, and the whispers from the apparitions turned into a unified, deafening scream. The icon suddenly burst into flames, and she dropped it in shock. "Well, that didn't work," Katie gasped, her voice heavy with frustration and exhaustion. Meanwhile, Daniel had already climbed onto the windowsill, preparing to jump. In that moment, I made a reckless but seemingly inevitable decision. I turned and ran toward the stairs. Ignoring the searing pain, I plunged into the fire and began sprinting downward. The flames scorched my entire body, and my clothes began to stick to my skin, but I kept running with every ounce of strength I had left. The staircase blurred before my eyes, and I lost track of which floor I was on. All I knew was that the further I went down, the weaker the flames became. After what felt like an eternity, I realized I had gone far beyond the third floor and had somehow ended up in the basement. The air was damp here, and the fire hadn't spread as quickly as it had upstairs. As I ran past the basement rooms, I frantically searched for a window, one without bars. To my relief, I finally found one. Climbing onto an old table cluttered with notebooks, I pulled myself up and squeezed through the window. Outside, it was already night, and the only light came from the fire raging inside the school, illuminating the area with an eerie glow. The adrenaline dulled the pain at first, but as soon as I put some distance between myself and the school and started to feel even a sliver of safety, the burns made themselves known with unbearable intensity. The pain overwhelmed me, and I collapsed, slipping into unconsciousness. The last thing I saw before losing consciousness was Daniel's body lying on the ground beneath the school's windows. In those windows, dozens of shadowy figures loomed, and among them, I could make out Katie and Marie.